Hello, and welcome back to the Let's Talk About It podcast with Lisbene, and I am herself, Lisbene. Um, Before I start this episode, I want to apologize that it's taken so long for this episode to get here, but I had already recorded this whole episode, and when Andrew went to edit it, there was no audio. So here's take two, and hopefully this goes well. Also, I am 13 weeks and 3 days pregnant. Ta-da! And we're also in the middle of kind of moving, so if you see the boxes, see, like, there's one right there, there's one back there. They're like everywhere right now. There's barely any room to walk around. Sometimes it's frustrating, but we're going with the flow of everything. Just wait for everything to fall into place, waiting for the new place to be ready, and then we'll actually be packing stuff up more. But yeah, finally over the morning sickness for the most part, I guess. I don't know. Sometimes I still throw up and it's random, so I don't know. The pregnancy is just all over the place, But 13 weeks and 3 days. I do have a pretty big belly if you can't really tell. I can't. Hold on. Let me turn on the front light for just a moment. Never mind. Wait. Nope, not one. There we go. See? Oof, belly. But it's my third pregnancy, and they say because it is my third one, I will be starting to show sooner, and my stomach will get bigger faster. So it's all a normal part of the process. So now that that's over, and that is also why the background looks totally different. There's a whole lot going on. We're moving, pregnant, just trying to go with the flow of life and keep everything still going. So yeah, without further ado, let's get into this episode, guys. In this episode, I want to talk about several things. I'm a strong believer in signs, and when I recorded the first episode, I saw some angel numbers just as a sign that I am going in the right direction and doing the right thing. As well as the angel numbers, I feel I have received several signs to go in this direction for the episode rather than what I had planned originally. One of the topics I feel drawn to talk about is older cases that may not have exactly been reported, but also one of my personal favorite reported cases, in my opinion, of justified revenge. Although I do not agree with violence, I think in certain situations it is allowed. So I'm going to be connecting two different subjects with this thought, with older cases of women who got revenge on abusive husbands, maybe not in the most legal way. My favorite of these is Lorena Bobbitt, and today the different men that are going out and attacking the child predators in public. Because as messed up as this may make me sound, thinking about these two things kind of makes me a little happy, and I laugh just a little bit and feel good for the people who got the revenge, and I laugh at how great karma is. In early times when divorce was difficult or impossible to obtain, particularly for women, there were cases of women taking revenge on abusive or unfaithful husbands. While documented instances from earlier historical periods are relatively rare due to societal norms and limited legal reporting on such issues, there are some examples from folklore, historical accounts, and criminal cases that provide insight into how many women may have sought retribution. Annie Williams in 1663. Annie Williams was living in colonial Virginia, was married to a wealthy and abusive husband. Unable to divorce him legally, Annie allegedly conspired with her lover, Edward Johnson, to murder her husband by poisoning him. Both Annie and her lover were executed for the crime. This case highlights how, in an era when divorce was nearly impossible, some women resorted to extreme measures to escape abusive marriages. Women poisoners in medieval and early modern Europe. Poison was commonly used as a tool by women in situations where they had little legal or societal power. During the 16th and 17th centuries in Europe, women were disproportionately accused of poisoning their husbands or other male-female members. The case of Gianna Tofana, I think I'm saying it right, Gianna Tofana, in Italy in the 17th century, who created poison known as aqua tofana. She allegedly helped women poison their abusive husbands, leading to what was seen as a female conspiracy against men. Julia was eventually executed, but her poison reportedly killed hundreds of men. And if you have ever heard of Aqua Tofana, there was an episode of I think it was Dark History that Bailey Sarian did about Aqua Tofana, and she's saying it like that the whole time, and every time I think of it, that's what I think of. But anyways, many early legends and folk tales tell stories of women taking revenge on their husbands, particularly when they were trapped in loveless or abusive marriages. These stories often reflect societal frustrations with the limited options women had. Lady Macbeth syndrome, inspired by Shakespeare's famous character. This term refers to historical and literary depictions of women who push their husbands to commit acts of murder, often out of revenge or desire for power. The legend of Bluebird, a folktale in which the bluebird is a wealthy man who kills his wives when they disobey him. Some versions of the tale include the final wife turning the tables on him, killing him in self-defense or revenge. Catherine Hayes, 1726, England. Catherine Hayes conspired with two accomplices, including her son, to kill her abusive husband. After enduring years of abuse and neglect, she and conspirators murdered her husband, John Hayes, by decapitating him. The group planned the murder in advance, and while her actions were deemed brutal, her case drew attention to the lack of legal protection for women in abusive marriages. Catherine was convicted and burned at the stake for her crime, a common punishment for women involved in the murder of their husbands during that period. Jacobean revenge plays in real-life echoes. Literature's reflection of reality, Jacobean revenge tragedies such as The Duchess of Malfi by John Webster frequently portrayed women seeking revenge against powerful men or abusive husbands. These plays often mirrored real societal frustrations and anxieties about women's lack of power and may have inspired or reflected some real-world actions. In colonial America, legal divorce was incredibly rare, and some women took matters into their own hands when faced with abusive or tyrannical husbands. Local authorities sometimes turned a blind eye to accidental deaths of abusive husbands, especially if the community was sympathetic to the woman's plight. Before legal reforms and the expansion of women's rights, some women in abusive or controlling marriages had few options to escape, leading to extreme measures like poisoning, murder, or societal sabotage. While these cases are exceptional rather than typical, they reflect the desperate lengths to which women might go to when trapped in oppressive domestic situations. Many of these actions were responses to the lack of legal protections and societal norms that privileged male authority, and they reveal a historical struggle for autonomy in the face of limited options for justice. Beatrice Cenci, 1598, in Italy. Beatrice Cenci was a young noblewoman in Rome whose father, Francesco Cenci, was a notoriously abusive and violent man. Beatrice, along with her stepmother and brothers, conspired to murder Francesco after years of enduring his cruelty, including allegations of physical and sexual abuse. In 1598, they successfully killed him by bludgeoning him and throwing his body off a balcony to make it look like an accident. When the murder was discovered, Beatrice and her family were arrested and executed for the crime. Beatrice became a symbol of resistance against tyrannical authority, and her case has been immortalized in Italian folklore and literature as a tragic story of a woman who saw no way out of her abusive situation but through violent revenge. Mary Channing, 1705, England. Mary Channing was married against her will at the age of 19 to a much older man, Richard Channing. Unhappy in the marriage and allegedly subjected to abusive treatment, Mary poisoned her husband with mercury. Mary's act of poisoning her husband was considered a desperate attempt to free herself from a marriage she had been forced into. Though the abuse she endured was not heavily documented, she was convicted of murder and hanged in 1705. I apologize if I say her name wrong. Madame de Brinvilliers, 1676, France. Marie Madeleine Diabre, better known as Madame de Brinvilliers, was involved in a poisoning scandal where she murdered her father and two brothers. She is also suspected of having poisoned her abusive husband, although evidence against him was conclusive. At a time when women had little control over their own lives or marriages, Marie Madeleine believed to have turned to poison as a means of asserting control and seeking revenge for years of mistreatment. After being exposed, Madame de Brinvilliers was convicted and executed in 1676. Her case became famous as part of a larger wave of poisonings in French high society. Margaret Vincent, 1830s England. Margaret Vincent was married to an abusive husband in the 19th century England. After enduring years of violence, she and a male accomplice conspired to kill him, but in a less violent manner than some other cases. Margaret had her husband poisoned to end her suffering without resorting to physical violence. This case drew attention to the plight of women who had no legal way to escape abusive marriages. Margaret was arrested, tried, and ultimately executed for her role in the crime. Like many women in her position, she faced harsh punishment despite the circumstances of abuse that led to the murder. These cases show that historically, women trapped in abusive marriages often had few options and sometimes resort to extreme measures. While these instances typically resulted in severe legal consequences, they highlight the desperation of women in societies that offer them little protection or autonomy in abusive relationships. The case of Lorena Bobbitt, later Lorena Gallo, is one of the most infamous and widely publicized incidents of domestic violence and revenge in modern American history. It captured public attention not only due to the sensational nature of the crime, but also because it brought discussions of domestic abuse, marital rape, and gender dynamics into the spotlight. The incident happened on June 23rd, 1993 in Manassas, Virginia. I'm sorry, guys. I'm getting over being sick. My throat is gravel right now. When Lorena Bobbitt cut off her husband John Wayne Bobbitt's penis while he was asleep, after the act, she fled their apartment and threw the severed organ out of her car window. It was later found and surgically reattached to John Bobbitt. Lorena claimed that she had suffered years of physical, emotional, and sexual abuse at the hands of her husband, John. On the night of the incident, she alleged that John had raped her, which she claims was the final straw after enduring long-term mistreatment. Lorena's defense rested on their argument that she had experienced irresistible impulse due to the abuse and trauma she had suffered. Lorena's defense was largely based on accusations of John's violent and controlling behavior, including allegations of repeated marital rape and other forms of abuse. During the trial, these accusations played a significant role in shaping public perceptions of both Lorena and John. Lorena's trial. Lorena pleaded not guilty by reason of temporary insanity, claiming that the years of abuse had driven her to act in a moment of extreme distress and loss of control. In January 1994, Lorena was acquitted of charges of malicious wounding due to temporary insanity. She was ordered to undergo a 45-day psychiatric evaluation, but was not given a prison sentence. John's trial. John Bobbitt was charged with marital sexual assault based on Lorena's testimony that he had raped her on the night of the incident. He was acquitted of these sexual charges, which sparked further debate about the treatment of marital rape allegations in the legal system. The case became a media circus with widespread coverage that often focused more on the sensational details, the severed penis, rather than the underlying issues of domestic violence and abuse. The case ignited debates about gender roles, domestic abuse, and how the justice system handles cases of spousal violence. Lorena became both vilified and celebrated in different circles. Some saw her as a symbol of female empowerment or as a woman pushed to the brink, while others criticized her actions as excessive and cruel. Well, I think, in my opinion, I'll give my opinion at the end of this because impact. The Bobbitt case brought unprecedented attention to issues of domestic violence and marital rape. While the sensationalism of the incident dominated headlines, it also led to more serious conversations about how abuse victims were treated by the legal system and society. Although John Bobbitt was acquitted, the case raised awareness about marital rape, a crime that until the late 20th century had often been legally unrecognized or unprosecuted. It sparked discussion on the legitimacy of spousal sexual assault claims and the challenges survivors face in proving abuse within a marriage. Lorena's case highlighted the psychological toll that long-term abuse can take on victims, contributing to discussions about the battered woman syndrome and how trauma can influence a person's behavior. The case added momentum to broader efforts in the 1990s to strengthen legal protections for victims of domestic violence, including pushing for reforms to recognize and prosecute marital rape more seriously. After the trial, Lorena legally changed her name to Lorena Gallo and became an advocate for domestic violence awareness. She has spoken out about her experiences and worked to help victims of abuse through her organization, the Lorena Gallo Foundation. John attempted to capitalize on the novelty of the case, making appearances in the media and even participating in adult films. However, he continued to face legal troubles, including arrest for domestic violence and theft in years following the trial. The Bobbitt case left a lasting impact on American popular culture and discussions about domestic violence. The sensationalism surrounding the case somewhat overshadowed this year's underlying issues. Excuse me. But it also forced many people to confront the reality of spousal abuse and its psychological consequences. The case continues to be referenced in discussions about gender dynamics, victimhood, and the complex legal and emotional aspects of domestic violence. In recent years, documentaries and interviews with Lorena, such as the 2019 Amazon docuseries Lorena, have attempted to reframe the narrative, focusing more on her experiences as a victim of domestic violence rather than the sensational nature of the incident itself. Now, what I think about Lorena Bobbitt, okay? Girl, power to you. Like, go off, girlfriend. Go the F off. Like, that woman was like, nah, you're not going to do this to me no more. I'm going to cut your shit off. And I fully support that. Like, if you are in an abusive situation, if someone is, like, sexually abusing you, I completely agree with cutting their dick off. Like, bite that shit off if you have to. Like, I would not sit there and just take it. But, you know, after so long, she just couldn't take it anymore, so she had to cut it off. Girl, I get it. I would have done the same thing. Shit. Now, to the second topic of this episode. Sensation that has been sweeping across TikTok. Before I talk about this, I want to stress the fact that I do not condone violence. This is not me encouraging people to do this, but I do enjoy watching these videos on TikTok, okay? If you have not heard of this yet, it is dads, bikers, and men inviting child predators into public to meet with who they think is an underage child, and when they arrive, they find a man waiting there for them, and they get visibly confused, anxious, and scared for good reason, because when the man starts asking who they are here to meet with, and they try to avoid the question until they basically get the shit beat out of them. I honestly think this is a better way to deal with these people, in my opinion. The legal repercussions of child predators are not severe enough for the crime that they are committing of assaulting an innocent child that will have lifelong psychological effects from the assault, and some will never recover from this. So I did research about repercussions, sentences, and for different things, and here are some of those stats. The legal repercussions for child predators vary significantly based on the nature of the crime, jurisdiction, and specific circumstances of the case. Generally, child predators are charged with crimes such as sexual abuse, child pictures, and child exploitation and statutory rape. The penalties for these offenses are severe and include lengthy prison sentences, registration as a sex offender, and sometimes lifetime supervision. The average prison sentence for convicted child predators can vary, but typically falls within 10 to 25 years for serious offenses such as child sexual abuse. For crimes involving child pictures, sentences tend to range from 5 to 20 years, depending on the volume of material and other aggravating factors such as intent to distribute or past criminal records. Child molestation or abuse. Many states impose minimum sentences of around 10 years, with maximum sentences reaching life in prison for the most severe cases if aggravating factors are present, such as the use of force or repeat offenses. The sentences tend to be much longer. Child picture possession. This often carries a federal mandatory minimum of 5 years, with sentences extending up to 20 years depending on the case. Producing child pictures has a much harsher penalty, often starting at 15 years and going up to 30 years or more. The shortest sentences for child predators can occur in cases where there is a plea bargain, the crime was less severe, no physical contact, or the defendant has no prior criminal history. There are mitigating circumstances. In rare instances, some offenders have received sentences as low as 1 to 5 years, particularly if the offense involved lesser charges like possession of a small amount of child pictures without distribution. However, these cases are highly scrutinized and controversial. In the most egregious cases, such as serial molesters, abusers of very young children, or those who have inflicted severe harm, sentences can reach life in prison without the possibility of parole. For instance, a convicted child predator who abuses multiple children over an extended period of time can face consecutive life sentences. While rare, some states such as Louisiana have considered or imposed the death penalty for child predators who were convicted of aggravated child rape. However, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled in Kennedy versus Louisiana 2008 that the death penalty is unconstitutional for child rape cases where the victim was not killed, effectively limiting the ultimate punishment to life imprisonment. Use of violence, repeat offenses, involvement in organized exploitation, trafficking, or victims being particularly young can increase the sentence. Many cases are resolved through plea agreements, which can result in reduced sentences in exchange for a guilty plea or cooperation. Child pictures and exploitation cases often fall under federal jurisdiction, which tends to impose harsher penalties than state courts. Repeat offenders often face significantly harsher penalties, including mandatory life sentences in some states, under three strikes laws. Overall, the justice system imposes strict penalties on child predators to protect the public. Those sentences can vary widely depending on jurisdiction, the specifics of the crime, and the legal process. The relapse rates for child predators, or the likelihood that they will reoffend after serving their sentences, have been the subject of numerous studies. These rates can vary depending on the type of offender, the nature of the offense, and the length of the time since release. Overall rates. Research generally shows that sexual offenders have lower rates compared to other types of offenders, but child sex offenders are still a concern. The U.S. Department of Justice reports that 12 to 14% of child sex offenders reoffend within 5 years of release. This number can vary by jurisdiction and the length of times observed after release. Show that contact offenders, particularly those who abuse young children, tend to have a higher likelihood of reoffending compared to non-contact offenders. Those convicted of child picture-related offenses have a lower rate of reoffending compared to contact offenders, with some studies showing that rates of around 5 to 10% for reoffending related to child pictures. Things that factor into relapse rates are age. Older offenders tend to have lower relapse rates compared to younger offenders. The prior offenses. Individuals with a history of sexual offenses have a much higher likelihood of reoffending, with some studies showing rates as high as 40%. Treatment programs. Participation in sex offender treatment programs can significantly reduce relapse rates. Studies suggest that offenders who complete treatment are less likely to reoffend, with reductions in relapse rates by up to 50% compared to untreated offenders. Over long periods, 10 to 20 years, relapse rates can rise. For example, a study found that over a 15-year period, 52% of untreated child molesters reoffended. Interestingly, sexual offenders, including child predators, generally have lower relapse rates compared to individuals convicted of non-sexual violent crimes. For example, some studies report general relapse rates for all criminals at around 68% compared to the lower figures of child predators. Many countries, including the U.S., require sex offenders to register in national or local databases, often for life, which helps law enforcement monitor the behavior. Some states in the U.S. have laws allowing the civil commitment of high-risk sex offenders, keeping them in secure facilities after their prison sentences if they are deemed likely to reoffend. Cognitive behavioral treatment programs for sex offenders can lower relapse rates. However, access to these programs varies significantly. While the average relapse rate for child predators varies depending on the type of offense and other factors, the general range is between 5% and 24% over a 5-year period. Long-term rates may be higher, particularly among untreated offenders. Programs aimed at monitoring and rehabilitating offenders are critical in reducing reoffense rates. There has been a rise in vigilante-style videos on platforms like TikTok, where individuals or groups confront suspected child predators in public spaces. These videos often show the confrontation of alleged predators, with some resulting in physical altercations or threats. The people behind these videos generally pose as minors online to catch individuals attempting to meet children for inappropriate purposes. Some notable examples include TikTok accounts like Dads Against Predators, DAP, Predicators, and Bikers Against Predators. These groups set up stings where they confront and sometimes physically engage with the suspect after revealing their intention to meet minors. These confrontations are often recorded and shared, gaining millions of views. While these videos have sparked debates about justice and online safety, they have also raised concerns about the dangers of vigilante actions, including potential legal consequences and risk to public safety. Law enforcement agencies often discourage such vigilante efforts, advising that any criminal activity should be reported to the proper authorities. Although it is frowned upon, I can't say that I disagree with these men and what they are doing. Although legally I know it's not an option, I think we should bring back the death penalty or castration for child predators. Although I'm not sure many people will agree with me about that. But if anyone hurt my child, they may not be alive for very much longer. I'm just saying, putting that out there. Don't condone violence, like I said, but I do really enjoy watching these videos on this TikTok of these dads just standing up for kids in general, because if not this dad beating them up, then they might try to actually go for another fucking kid. Like, I think they're doing a great job out there, okay? I think they're doing a great thing, in my opinion, but yeah. So I had the links for the end of this for Manassas, Virginia, where Lorena Bobbitt, where that case happened from. I wanted the links in that area, but they disappeared, so I'm just going to read them from Google. There is Thriveworks Counseling and Mental Health in Manassas, Virginia. That number is 571-778-3537. And Office for Women and Domestic and Sexual Violence Services in Fairfax, Virginia, 703-324-5730. And here are more numbers. This is the Prince William, Virginia website. This is where I'm getting all these other ones from. The Victim Witness Assistance Program is 703-392-7083. Domestic Violence Program Manager number is 703-792-6065. Mental Health and/or Substance Counseling, Manassas Office is 703-792-7800. The Woodbridge Office is 703-792-4900. The ACTS Domestic Violence 24-hour service number is 703-221-4951. And I think that's all. Like, there is a sexual assault services crisis number 24-hour hotline number 703-368-4141. And I think that is all of the numbers. There are a lot more resources linked on this website, and I will have all of that linked at right here. And then I will also try to link it in the box down below. So at the end of this, I do want to talk a little about my story involving my mom. But before I get into that, I want to talk about Marcellus Williams. Marcellus Williams' case gained attention as a miscarriage of justice, highlighting the ongoing debates around the death penalty and the use of DNA evidence. Marcellus Williams was convicted of the 1998 murder of Felicia Gale, a former reporter of the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, in her home. He was sentenced to death in 2001 for the crime. The case against him included several key pieces of evidence. The testimony of two informants, one was his former girlfriend and the other was a fellow inmate. Both claimed that Williams had confessed to them about the murder. Physical evidence such as items like a laptop belonging to the victim were found in Williams' possession, linking him to the crime scene. However, Williams always maintained his innocence, and his defense team consciously argued that the conviction was flawed and based on unreliable testimony from the informants. DNA evidence. The turning point in Williams' case came from DNA testing on the murder weapon, a knife used to stab Felicia Gale. When advanced DNA testing methods were applied to the knife, it revealed that Williams' DNA was not present on the weapon. The DNA that was found did not match Williams', raising serious doubts about his involvement in the murder. Additionally, none of the physical evidence, such as hair fibers and blood collected from the crime scene, could be linked to him. This new DNA evidence played a crucial role in delaying Williams' execution, which was scheduled for August 22nd, 2017. Just hours before the execution, Missouri Governor Eric Greitens, don't know how you say that, but yeah, granted a stay of execution and approved a board of inquiry to review the new DNA evidence. The board was tasked with examining whether the DNA test results and other evidence were sufficient to exonerate Williams and prevent the state from executing an innocent man. Impact and controversy. The case has reignited debates about the fallibility of witness testimony, especially from jailhouse informants who may have ulterior motives for providing information. The use of DNA evidence as a crucial tool in ensuring justice, particularly in capital punishment cases. The broader ethical and legal concerns surrounding the death penalty, especially in cases where new technologies can potentially prove someone's innocence after their conviction. Marcellus Williams was executed September 24th. The day before his execution, the governor denied him clemency in a case that DNA had proved him innocent. My thoughts and love is with his family, and I can only imagine the sorrow, hurt, and anger that they feel to have someone so close to you be killed for something that they didn't do. You can donate to the Innocence Project to prevent more wrongful convictions like this by going to info@innocenceproject.org. Now, it's time to talk about my narcissistic mother. Karen, if you're watching, I don't care. Like, honestly, don't give a fuck. My whole life, my mother has been on and off of crack. For as long as I can remember, my brother and I went back and forth between several different family members, my grandma, aunt, and my great aunt. My mother once came and illegally took me from Indiana when I was in first grade and took me to South Carolina for months, and I missed a lot of school, so by the time my great aunt had got me back to Indiana, I had to restart the first grade. But my whole life she has been unstable. The longest time she was an actual mother was when I was 9 or 10 until I was about 18, and that's when she met the abusive piece of absolute trash that got her back on crack. And from 2016 on, I would depend on my mom from time to time just for her to abandon me with a trailer and bills, with no car or no help at all. Just completely abandon me to go run off with this man to go do drugs rather than being an actual mother for once in her life, maybe. I understand that people think of addiction as a disease, but I disagree with that because it was your choice to pick it up in the first place and to try it. Like, no one is forcing that crack down your throat. So don't say it's disease when it was your choice to do it in the first place. Okay. Like, I myself have had problems with certain substances, but I've also had the control to know when something is becoming a problem before it turns into a real addiction. I've never felt dependent on a drug before, so I don't understand people that let drugs ruin everything in their life and try to make excuses about it. I also refuse to feel bad about cutting my mother off because of everything she has done to me in my life. And I constantly did nothing but help her time after time, but she keeps on going back to this disgusting sick person that has done nothing but tried to kill her. He broke her eye socket, so she has a metal plate in her face. He has stabbed her and beat her so much. And my mom is a smart and beautiful woman who does not deserve to be with this man, or he does not deserve her. She was clean for 2 years before she went back to him this time. The longest she has been clean since 2016. All for a sick pedophile that has asked you, his wife, to come to me, your daughter, to ask me to perform sexual acts on him is so disgusting. And no matter what I do or say, you don't see anything wrong with with going back to him. Well, maybe you aren't any better than him either, Karen. All the abuse and shit you put me through, I would never even think about doing any of that to my children. Having kids is a lifelong commitment. You don't just take off and leave them when they turn 18 and throw them out to defend for themselves. Like, you're supposed to love and cherish them. Love and cherish your kids every day, all day, until the day you die. Like, and I will make sure my kids know how much I love them, because I'm 100% a better mother than you, Karen. But that's because your mom raised me. I don't know how you turned out so messed up, but that was my little rant, kind of just going into a bit of shit with my mom. This is also the third pregnancy I'm going through without her, so that's exciting and great and super fucking emotional, because every day sometimes all I want is my mom, but I can't have that because she is not making the right decisions in life. And instead of holding on to the negativity and the hurt and pain, I'm letting it go. I'm cutting her off, and I'm not dealing with the situation anymore because of the stress it has already caused me in my life, and I can't deal with any more of that stress. So, that being said, I hope everyone has a great and lovely, beautiful, amazing day. I hope everyone makes the right choices and does the right things today and loves everyone around them. Yeah. Have a nice day. Bye. I'll see you next episode.